Welcome to another CIRF report, May 6th, May 7th, 2019. And CIRF report has everything to do with basically the next generation of horoscope, astrology, finding the influence. But we're using lots of different technologies. We're literally technologies. And so if you haven't seen the beginner's guide, that's a great place to start. But even that is a little outdated because we're introducing what's called the Rave Mandala from human design. And we'll get into that later. And we're just going to go through kind of day by day explaining what this thing and how this thing is going to help us. Basically, we're going to include the I-Ching readings for the astrology outlay and hopefully get even more accuracy than we've seen before. Let's get started, except for this. The astrology in the next couple of days is very, very congested. The charts that I'm going to show you, I'm going to be able to zoom in. That's a little bit different. The formatting is going to be different, but I'm going to be able to zoom in so that we can see the actual planets and where they are. But there's a lot of lines in there. And so anyway, just be forewarned. We're going to start with the DreamBot. If you haven't seen the DreamBot, if you don't know what that is, see the beginner's guide. We have three main memes here. And the first top word is principle. Now, of course, there's two different spellings of principle and various meanings of each spelling. But in the world of dreams, the dreams are very metaphoric, and so we're including all of the connotations. In fact, we have an overlap in the meme. Principle is going to be kind of like principled, like I have purpose. So like a purpose, existential meaning and all that. So big, sun, interested, suggested. These are kind of like ideals, okay? But then the other version of it is very much like school. There's a principle of a school, and then thirsty for knowledge, and children are there. The word school is there. So there's a lot of learning in the blue arrows. And then in the yellow arrows is really about negative perceptions: narrow, past, losing, worst, and below. And it's a perception, and it's a comparison to other things. So without further ado, let's get into the new astrology. Okay. As mentioned before, we have, and watch this, I'm going to zoom in a little bit. We have another zoom here that I'm going to show you, but just an overview of the chart itself. You have tropical on the inside. You have the Rave Mandala from human design on the middle, and then you've got sidereal, true sidereal, which uses the actual size of the constellations. And we use the sidereal for the solution. Everything else is the influence. In fact, that DreamBot that we just saw was the main memes, as above, so below. So we are seeing the memes playing out from the universal influences. That's the value of adding in the DreamBot. So anyway, let's zoom in even more. And you're going to see a very congested sky on Monday. The, let's see, make sure this is right. The 6th. All right, May 6th. In the morning, we're starting off with a square. The moon makes a square to Neptune. And so, maybe confusion and, your imagination is a little bit more wacky than normal. You've also got a sextile up to Venus. So that's fairly harmonious. So, moon being emotional and Venus being relationships and maybe some finance in there. But also early in the morning, we have a square to a Venus. This is kind of a hard aspect. Venus and Saturn making a square together. Saturn still kind of conjunct with Pluto and the South Node here in Capricorn. So there's a lot of shoulds. Both of these are retrograde. So, and in a square, it is kind of more conflicted. And so, I'm imagining the Saturn bringing in possibly some hurdles, especially with relationships, maybe even financial limitations. And so that's going to be probably somewhat of an influence. And then later in the day, we have a couple more things here. We have the moon making opposition with Jupiter which we covered. If you go back to the last surf, we covered that with a Mars opposition to Jupiter. So that influence is still in the game. And that's kind of like a feeling of Trump or achievement. I hate using the word Trump because people automatically think of the person, but it's also kind of like a noun, or a verb, I trump you. But anyway, that's not really the major influence here. But Moon conjunct Mars is going to be pretty important. So let's go back out. I'm going to show you the I-Ching, or the I-Ching, for hexagram 45. Now, this comes from Human Design, and I will be putting out a video of how we're going to orchestrate and how we're going to integrate Human Design into this. But I don't want to get too far off track. So let's just stay on, just assume that you kind of know a little bit how this is integrated. We're going to go see what the I-Ching says about hex 45. Here's the influence. You've got Mars in Gemini. Okay, Gemini being, learning. There's your learning one. That's why we have this meme here of Gemini. That's our B. B is the school and the learning. And so Moon and Mars are in tropical Gemini. And so there is a lot of learning. And we want to really go out and get it. Mars is a really go get them. So we're going to have that emotional and yang energy towards wanting to learn. Okay, so what does the I Ching say? It says people with shared ideals. Interesting that we have the Moon sextile Venus in here. I find that very interesting. So anyway, it has to do with other people, and Gemini is very good with other people typically. Consolidated purpose persuades individuals to action. Success is inevitable when we have a consolidated purpose. Focus on similarities rather than differences. Getting prepared for what might come in your group. And then basically your individual self, your energy is invested in a cause greater than yourself. So this is going to come back later in the next I Ching hexagram on the other side of the zodiac. So just suffice it to say that we want to be, or the influence is to be with other people with shared ideals. Shared ideals, okay? And that goes up to this purpose and inner truth from the Dreambot, the purpose and the principle, okay? All right, now this is Tuesday, all right? Next day, still very confusing. I got good news for those of you who are new to this. The charts are not normally this busy. This is very unusual. And so we have the Venus square Saturn. That still remains because, these planets aren't moving as fast as like the moon and, transient that fast. So you can see how far the moon transited from the last day. But the moon's going to make a couple sextiles up to Uranus and Mercury. Mercury is going to make a conjunction with Uranus. So, wow. I mean, we're going to be communicating to each other some serious changes and in the sign of Taurus. And so these changes are probably going to have to do with some material thing. So be expecting some sort of change there. And maybe you're not even aware of it until you actually start communicating with other people. That's the Mercury. You're going to have probably a lot of thoughts around. Now, thoughts around change. Uranus tends to throw grenades into things, particularly your thinking. So you might end up going, racing thoughts like, how am I going to solve this big change thing? So if you're noticing yourself having racing thoughts, you probably have had some big changes. We also have the sun making a sextile up to Neptune. I mean, this is getting ridiculous. All right. So to make this simple, I have noticed, let's go back to the kind of zoom out. You notice we have meme C, B, and A here. And this is kind of the life cycle of experiential learning. Okay. Remember, learning is the meme from the Dreambot meme B. We basically have negative perceptions from the learning that we did from the past. And hopefully what we can extract is more meaning about what our life means and where we're headed in the future. That is a very Taurus thing, okay? But don't get me wrong. But I noticed that the Venus square Saturn, which is still in play here, is probably the biggest alignment that we need to talk about because it includes all three of the memes. And so what I did was I looked in Saturn and Pluto just happened to be in hexagram 61. So we need to look at what that is. But first, let's look at the overall influence. It's about right purpose. Remember the hexagram from yesterday was about collective purpose. Well, this is also purpose, but let me show you the influence first. So we have Saturn in Capricorn square Venus. Capricorn is about goals and steadfast and perseverance and achievement and all that. Saturn is the opposite. It's kind of showing you restriction and limitations and hurdles and expectations. Mind you, Saturn is in retrograde. So these kind of feel even worse than normal, right? Then you've got the Venus square. And so relationships might have issues and financial limitations. Okay, so that's the backdrop. Now let's look at what the hexagram says. Hexagram 61 from the I-Ching says inner truth. There's a typo there. It furthers one to cross the great water. So you can see that perseverance is the key here for Hex 61. Here's a quote from the Book of Changes. Where the community of interest ceases, the holding together ceases also. Only when the bond is based on what is right, on steadfastness, will it remain so firm that it triumphs over everything. Okay, what is this trying to say? What this says is that your groups, in other words, Venus, the Venus square here, are going to disintegrate if the underlying purpose of that community is not the right purpose. The groups that hang on through these troubling times have the right purpose, okay? And so that's what that is saying. Now, yeah, I mean, there's a lot more in this. I'm trying to make this simple. Let's look at the solution overall, all right? The solution overall is that we're going to use this Venus square Saturn as two aspects that we need. And we need the emotions from Pisces for the collective ability to bond with other people. Now, Pisces can kind of start getting, kind of away from reality in their imaginations and in their feelings. And we don't want to do that. We still want to bond. And in order to bond, you need those emotions. So Pisces, very emotional. We need to have our emotions so that you can check your inner truth. That was the hexagram over here. Your inner truth compared with the Venus or the collective's purpose of that group. And then once you verified that your commensurate, your inner truth is congruent with the group's purpose, then we can take the Sagittarius, which is on the other side, and go for it and proceed and persevere. And that's with the Capricorn backdrop or the Capricorn influence there from tropical Capricorn. It wants you to keep going. And with Sagittarius, yeah, they can kind of be the 100-yard dash thing and kind of just drop out after 100 yards. But, that gives you the ability to go and go and go. But the key is right purpose with the group that you're in. So here's the slideshows that are going to be on social media. Here's National Dream Center's version. Is the common purpose is going to bring individual endurance and toughness through Saturn's hardships. So the other thing that I didn't mention is, what if you're trying to do all this alone? It's going to be monumentally harder. That's the whole point. And unfortunately, some of us are going to fall into that Venus square Saturn. And so relationship will become the kind of the obstacle. And so you will find that you're kind of having to trudge through there alone. And that's going to make it harder. The endurance is going to make it much harder and tough. So it is key to start finding or start thinking about where you're going to find that other support, if that's the case for you, if you're finding that you don't have the right support or the right purpose. All right. And then here's the intervention is find your deep inner truth in a collective purpose. So you're wanting to enter a group that shares the same underlying goals of that group and that you can pour your passions into. That's the whole point of this. And then don't go it alone. Yeah, this was a confusing one. Yeah, I agree. I mean, there's so many different aspects, but hopefully these slides ease it down for you. If you have any questions, write those below. Let me know how the Zoom did for you and see if you guys can see the actual planets and the alignments and all that. Yeah, I know the charts are all messy and confusing, but you can always pause and kind of digest all those. Anyway, like your feedback, love your feedback, even if it's, criticizing or, just bring it out. We want to improve. We want to get our triangulation even better. We're going to eventually have guests on here that are going to be able to, do dream interpretation, maybe tarot, maybe some human design folks. The interviewees are endless out there, and I really do think this is the next wave of very personalized horoscopes, very personalized astrology. We're including both of the astrologies. And again, see the beginner's guide if you're still unclear on why we separate it. How can you use both of those? We basically use the tropical for the influence, but we also want to know what the solution is. And you've got to know where the star is in the actual sky. That's sidereal. And that's the solution, getting in alignment with the stars, as above, so below. But you have to recognize that the tropical is the ancient influence on not just you individually and your birth sign and all that, but the collective. And it shows in these dreams. It's absolutely fascinating to me how it continues to show these same memes in the dreams. So stay tuned. I enjoy this, and sorry I went long, but yeah. All right. See you guys. See you on Tuesday evening.